Good afternoon and welcome to the Educators AI Playbook. My name is Mark Orchison and joining me is Dan Fitzpatrick, the AI educator. And we're here today for the first edition of our monthly series on AI in education, specifically looking at the developments of AI over the past month. We're then going to look at the compliance issues associated with AI and bring in a guest on a weekly basis who is specific to or has something really interesting to say. For those who don't know, Dan is a best-selling author, Forbes contributor, and award-winning strategist on the integration of AI in education. As the author of the AI Classroom, the Ultimate Guide to AI in Education, he has helped over 150,000 educators worldwide embrace new technology. So Dan, it's a pleasure to have you here. And you've got two books, right? Two books that you have published and are award-winning bestsellers.
Yeah, it's great to be with you. I've been excited for this partnership for a while now because I think we're kind of what both of us bring to the table in terms of AI and education are kind of two halves of the same, two sides of the same coin. And I think people who are watching this and people who watch on catch up as well will get a lot from this, I think, and in terms of practical adoption that is safe. And yeah, thanks for promoting the books. I've actually got four, but it's but two's fine. Two's fine. We've got we at the moment kind of the ones we're pushing are two. So we've got Infinite Education, which is
Yep.
a strategy guide for educational leaders, and the Educators 2026 AI Guide, which is kind of like a handbook, which is designed for teachers, leaders, anyone in education who's moving forward with artificial intelligence over the next 12 months.
Perfect. And this webinar, I mean, this first edition has had an amazing amount of signups. We've had over 600 people sign up either to watch it on demand or to watch the recording. And I was taken back by the amount of interest in just learning a bit more about the developments in AI because there's so much noise around what is going on. There's so many people competing for a space around what they can do with AI. And there's also a lot of people competing for a space around the privacy, security, and safeguarding concerns around AI. But there's not much been, as you say, the joined up nature between the two. And I sort of feel that, I mean, one of the reasons why we had this discussion was schools are feeling a bit confused in terms of I can do all this stuff, but actually, what are the guide rails for sort of me to be living within? Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, and when I do a lot of work with educators and leaders around the world, and I always come back to this image in my head of one of those, those old-fashioned scales, those balance scales, and I think the way this technology works is the more we go for the benefits, the more risk there is.
Yeah.
Um, Naturally, because it's a tool that works best when it has context and therefore has information about you, your students, the world, and that's where the dangers come from. Then the handing over of information and doing that in a safe way
Yep.
is probably the biggest challenge of, I would say, our generation.
Yeah, I'd agree. Now, for those of you who are listening for the first time, Dan has a weekly newsletter that goes out. And this monthly webinar is really a digest, like an in-person digest around what happened over the previous month. So the team are putting in the links to where you can sign up for the newsletter, but also putting in the links to the LinkedIn profiles of both Nine and Dan. Because for us, whilst Dan and I are giving up our time, we have over 600 people that have given up their time to be part of this program of events, and we really want this to be meaningful for you. You've taken your time out of your day to either watch this on demand or to watch it live. So please put Q&A into the boxes today. You can put the Q&A, and me and Dan will be keeping an eye on that as we go. But by signing up to either the newsletter or on LinkedIn, when we post this sort of synopsis of what we've discussed today, you can add in your thoughts about the things that you think that we should be discussing either next month or the thoughts upon what we have talked about, talked about today. So please take advantage of that. And please do also sign up to Dan's newsletter, because next month we're going to be digesting everything that's happened in that newsletter. And by signing up to it, you'll have a head start. There are two other things that you will also see by signing up through the Nine platform for the session today. One is our Turing Trials card game, which is a downloadable card deck, which you can play. There we go. We both have it. But what we are doing over this next month, and we're going to call for some feedback, is creating a student version of the AI card game. And the Turing Trials is really about, at a leadership level, working through the types of issues that schools face in adapting AI. And Dan, we played it at a toddler event the other week, right? And the engagement and the conversations it was unreal in a way.
Yeah, it was great, that, wasn't it? It was we had a few hundred educational leaders in a room in London and played the game live. I thought you were pretty brave, to be fair, but you handled it like a pro. It was fantastic. I think even just the how simple it is at just introducing ideas of actually where there might be risks. I spoke to a few leaders in the room who kind of verbally expressed that, I didn't even realize this would be an issue. And so you not only introduce them to that, but the fact that you then get them to have the conversation and the cards facilitate a resolution to it as well. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, and it really the conversation. Forget the game. I think it's the conversation that the game sort of elicits. So like today, Dan, we've got you're about to give us an overview of what's happening in the month. We've got Patrick McGrath, who's going to give us you and Patrick had a conversation earlier this week on inclusion, a really important topic. And the guests that we have, when we were discussing who we should bring on, the conversation started with, okay, well, again, there's lots of people vying for the space, the attention. And what we want to do is to really bring in people whose voice may not be as high as everyone else, but they have something really, really important to say. And Dan, you suggested Patrick around inclusion, and I suppose my question to you is, why do you think that Patrick was an important voice for us to have a guest on today?
Yeah, well, I think simply for me, I think the whole topic of artificial intelligence in education, I think it's very easy for us to say, oh, well, that's an ICT thing, that's information technology, it's a cyber thing. And therefore, and in fact, you can see, especially here in the UK, and how the government are looking at new curriculum for 2028. And you can kind of see how they've been kind of lured into that a little bit, how they've mainly put it into the bracket of computer science. And I think we need to kind of break that down, because I think the impact of AI is, okay, fair enough, it's a technology, but it's going to impact all areas of our life, and therefore all areas of our schools. And so I wanted to bring Paddy on. Paddy who's he's a vice president, head of education at Everway, who make accessible technology for students, because he's able to give us a point of view of how this will impact our students who have special educational needs in our schools, students who need that extra support. And I think sometimes those students are the afterthought. We we prepare the lesson, and then we think, okay, well, how do we differentiate for those students? But actually, I think I'm really excited that we put Paddy on the first episode, because we're not putting inclusion as an afterthought. We're saying, this is important, and this is what we want to talk about first and foremost, because, as Paddy goes on to say in the interview, good inclusion doesn't just affect the people who necessarily need it the most. It affects all of our students.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. We were considering, there are other people we could have brought in, that like big bang voices that I would attract people to come and participate in this event. But we really want to bring in the difficult and sometimes overlooked issues, which is why the inclusion is so important. So we'll get started with Dan. Looking at the developments of AI over the past month, and as we're going through, please anyone put your questions to Dan in the Q&A as we're going through the the changes, because AI is moving at such a fast pace. I struggle to keep up. Dan, I do not know how you manage to do all the work that you do, plus keep up. But there's some changes this month with Gemini 3 and Nano Banana. And could you just take us through what those changes are, your thoughts about them, and you've done some sort of playing around, experimentation, should I say, with both?
Yeah, and like you say, it's difficult to keep up. It's I that's why I do the newsletter. That's why I do the daily podcast, because it puts me in a corner where I've got to stay on top of it.
Yeah.
Which is great, because then I get to see some of the developments that are happening. And one of them is, especially over the last month, is just how far Google and their AI, Google Gemini, has come. Now, I know many people will be watching this and be like, well, what's this got to do with me? I'm Microsoft, or I use another tool, another AI. I think it does, because what we find is that when one AI tool kind of goes out in front, the others try to copy it. And this is a constant race. So if Google has something that Microsoft doesn't at the minute, for example, Microsoft will be pushing to put it in. And I'm sure we'll probably cover Microsoft in maybe a future episode of this, but they're going through some advancements as well, and in creating some similar tools. But yeah, this month I feel like it's been very much about Google. And Google. In fact, I'm Google about a year ago invited me to be part of a program where I test their AI before it goes live. Now, this is really helpful for me, because then I get to stay up to date a little bit more, and I write for Forbes, so I can put some stories out there. So I was playing with their new AI, but they didn't tell us it was the new version of Gemini. They just said, "Oh, this is just an adaptation of the old Gemini," and then they revealed that it was the new Gemini. But I was blown away by it. I think primarily because of its ability to kind of think things through a lot more. Now, even just using that word "think" is kind of anthropomorphizing the AI. It doesn't think like we do, but the fact that it can reflect more on its answers before it gives them to the user, it can take more time to develop those answers. I think has been a huge upgrade in terms of the capabilities of this technology. And then we're seeing, just because of that simple upgrade in their AI model, like their core AI, them integrating it into different tools that they already have,
Yeah.
is providing new versions of, like you said, Nano Banana, which is their image generation tool. And because they've put the thinking model in there, now that's better. And so that's then facilitate lots of other tools, and new features to NotebookLM and so on. So I think a lot of people a year ago, well, let's say 2 years ago, thought, where's Google in this race? Where is Google? OpenAI with ChatGPT was rushing ahead.
Yeah.
And I think the smart people thought Google are just biding their time. They'll come in. I mean, after all, they own the world's information, and these models need information. And I think Google have now kind of overtaken, really, and kind of have arrived properly.
I mean, I certainly agree with that. I think NotebookLM, when it first came out, was, for me, was a game changer. Loved it. The and they've just progressed over a period of time with their developments, but very quietly and behind the scenes, where Microsoft has embedded Copilot very quickly into their products. But certainly from the schools that we work with, Copilot doesn't seem to be having the impact that certainly Gemini could have. And within your newsletter, you mentioned that Gemini 3 is different in terms of it's less like a search engine, more like a teaching coach. What did you mean by that?
Yeah, so I meant obviously specifically when teachers are using it.
Yeah.
And I think the capabilities with how it reasons and give answers means it can talk us through processes. It can help us with thinking through more as like a collaborative thinking partner, rather than just a tool that is almost transactional. I think a lot of the times because we don't fully know what it's capable of, and you don't know what you don't know, I think a lot of people use these tools to just do something for them, right? Create a lesson plan for me, right?
Yeah.
Create a task for me for my class. And I think a lot of people, once they've done that a few times, realize actually it's not amazing at doing that. It's quite average, and you could do better yourself. now that will come down to its lack of contextual awareness of who
Mm.
you are, your students, what your professional standards are. So I think the people who are using this really well now are starting to move more towards using it as kind of a sparring partner for thinking, a
Yeah.
sparring partner for creativity, for ideas, while staying in control. I wrote a chapter in my first book, The AI Classroom, called "Outsource Your Doing, Not Your Thinking." And I think that's still the foundational principle. I tell people when they use this, we've still got to be the main thinker and in control. But I think with this new upgrade to Gemini, it allows more of a coherent, more of a better experience when it comes to things like coaching, things like
Yeah.
mentoring. And they're not humans. They're not as good as humans at coaching and mentoring, but as a way to use it on the fly, as a way to use it
Yeah.
um, in and out of everyday life, I think the capabilities
Mm.
enhanced.
Well, I think one of the use cases that you were alluding to was around, yeah, coaching and teacher observation. And like there are a range of putting the privacy and the security issues to one side, but the experiment that you did in terms of uploading your keynote, it then gave you feedback on things like about pacing and clarity. So just sort of taking that in the lens of a school that in theory a teacher could record themselves, someone else, and put it through Gemini 3, and it would give them like an observation report. It would help them.
Yeah,
Is that the standard? Is
I
that what?
think I think I need to clarify a lot around this. So I'm not saying record yourself and put it into Gemini and in your classroom with kids in there like that. But I think when I explore these tools, I always come at it from the point of view of what's the new capability?
Got
Like
it. Yeah.
what could this lead to? What's the capability that now could be adopted into safer tools
Yeah.
that could be possible? So I would not recommend recording yourself with all the kids in the classroom and putting it into Gemini. But what we're seeing with the new version of Gemini is that it can analyze video. Now, in the past, when we've talked about analyzing video, we essentially what the AI has been doing is taking a transcript and analyzing the text from the video, whereas the new
Mm.
Gemini model actually analyzes the visual of the video as well. So what I did to experiment with this is I had a video of myself doing a keynote, so I put it in, and then I give it a framework, and I said, right, create a framework for what a good keynote talk should be like, base it
Yeah.
on Steve Jobs, famous people who have historically been amazing at keynotes. Come up with like a criteria, a rubric, and then could you analyze the video for me and then take me through it in places where I can improve, essentially. So, and I was blown away how well it did that. Now, I think a tool like Gemini, a tool like ChatGPT, Claude, these are what we call frontier AI tools. They're not designed to just be picked up and put in a classroom. But I was thinking, well, if it's got that capability now, an ed tech platform that can build in the security, build in
Hmm.
um, the regulations to it, could take the essence of that technology and possibly create something that could be really valuable for a teacher.
I think that just that development in itself of the Gemini not looking at this sort of the script, but actually looking at the video. I think give it 12 months, as you said, around an ed tech platform integrating it. I think that could be there's so many different types of use cases that
Yeah.
could apply for this is there's also this speed of development is outpacing a teacher or a school's ability to actually think of how this can be applied. Or if I do want to do it, it's so far out there that so I suppose the gap between how advanced it is and the frontier nature of it, and the sort of the lag of okay, well, we're in a school, I'm in a school, we've got these other problems to deal with. Um, it calls for it's quite an interesting dynamic there in terms of what it can do versus like the realities of actually working in school day to day. Um,
Yeah. I no, I think you're right there. And I think to be honest, I think although I do a lot of work on strategy and how we can prepare for this change, I think at the end of the day as well, we're humans and technology's changed quite a bit. Humans
yeah,
haven't changed for 10, 20,000 years. Like we're still the same humans that were around back then. And our brains work the same way, and we only have certain capacity. So I don't think I don't think people need to be harsh on themselves when they're thinking, "Oh, I'm behind. We might be
Mhm.
falling behind here," because the chances are, whatever new developments coming out, you're not going to be able to put directly into your
Yeah.
classroom anyway. You're going to, like we said, you're going to need the security around it. So I'd say being plugged into to webinars like this is amazing to keep ahead of this and keep your finger on the pulse. But don't think you have to be integrating every single thing. That would just be crazy.
Yeah, I really like the. I mean, NotebookLM. I think is a fantastic product, and there's some a real upgrade this month. And one of the things that you referenced was like learn your way about. You can have resources that become specific and individualized to you as a learner. And if I specifically look at the narrative within education within the UK over the past 20 years, a lot of that has been about individualized learning for students. But does this development with Notebook really give advance that or make that a possible reality?
Yes and no, I think is, and obviously there's with all of this there's a nuance. I think it's an exciting development. So especially Learn Your Way is essentially a tool where a teacher or a student could put in some content, maybe a website, maybe some pre-existing content that they already own, and put it in there, and then it turns that content into. I don't know about you when you checked this out, Mark, but it reminded me of a bit like an e-learning course, the way it was
Yeah,
structured,
yeah,
and
yeah.
bit of content, an assessment question, bit of content, an assessment question, then a different tab with like an AI generated video, an AI and different tab for an AI generated podcast. So some of the features that we see in NotebookLM, they've obviously just repurposed them for this platform. And then I think there was like an endpoint quiz integrated in there as well. That's all it was really. But the fact that when you do that, the student says, "Well, this is what I'm interested in. These are the types of topics I like to do. Maybe I'm a gamer. Maybe I'm into football. Maybe, and this is my age." And so what it does is it takes the content and restructures the content, rewords the content so that it appeals more to that student by bringing in examples, analogies, and so on from what their hobbies are. So I think it's a nice tool. I don't know how you feel about this, but I think like with a lot of these new tools, I think I sometimes think to myself, my goodness, if every teacher started using this right now, education is going to get really boring.
Yeah,
Like if every teacher moved to the podcast feature with a notebook LM, and then imagine being a student and getting 5 podcasts a day by
yeah.
those two voices that you hear in like. So I think I'm not saying this is something to be completely widely adopted, but I think what Google do when they present a tool like that is they go, right, this is what's capable, this is what
It's an
you can now
experiment, isn't it?
do.
They sort of present. I think they present experimentation tools. It doesn't look that great always. It's about you
Yeah.
playing with it and then finding its home, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, I think like a lot of ed tech, not just AI and not just ed tech, but just resources. Like imagine you were a student and you went to one class and the teacher was doing I don't know, like some task, some like task where everyone had to do a role play within it in the class. Really fun lesson. But then imagine you were the student and you went to your next lesson and that teacher was doing the same type of task. And then the next lesson. So this is not just AI. This is not just ed tech. This is, I think, just how do we build in variety? And obviously, AI isn't the answer to every single question in education. So I think the more we can vary it with tech and non-tech and AI and non-AI, I think the more wholesome the education is that our students get.
Perfect. One of the things you've been tracking is alpha schools, and I've seen quite a bit about alpha schools and
Yeah.
the way in some people. I mean, I saw it in I think it was in the Times or the New York Times or some major, and it's like this school just teaches its kids through AI, right? And there's no teachers. And you've been having conversations around Alpha. I believe you've met with them a few times. Um,
Yeah, I interviewed the founder, Mackenzie Price, a couple of weeks ago. Yeah.
So is this some sort of like, uncontrolled experiment with children? Would we buy like we've got a 9 month old this, and we're blessed with our first child this year. And part of like the whole AI concept really scares me, like as a parent, privacy, security, photos, all those other sorts of things. And now schools are having AI teach children. Is it some form of warped experiment, I suppose?
Yeah, it's something I think about a lot. I've got as you know, a 5 and a 6 year old at home, and I kind of think about this just like you do. You, Let me start with, I think any school that is innovating, I, 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 unless there's something really egregious about it from the get go, then I kind of I champion, because I think we need more people innovating within education and trying new ways of how we structure education for our students, and the more choice in the education market, I think, is better. Now, saying that, I saw the headlines as well, a few years ago, and thought, what does this look like in reality? I think, around the same time, there was a college or a school in
Mm.
England that was doing something similar as well, and they got a lot of backlash in the media because of that. Um, I think essentially we have to look behind the headlines. And that's what, when I did the interview with Mackenzie, I was looking behind the headlines to say, well, what actually do you do? Now, to
Mm.
cut a long story short, they do 2 hours in the morning where a student uses various machine learning and AI platforms, some of them that probably a lot of teachers use already. They're not talking to a chatbot.
Yeah.
They are essentially using adaptive platforms to learn maths, to learn English, to learn all of their kind of core academics. They do that within the first 2 hours, and then they spend the afternoon doing more of the project-based style learning, doing more of social learning, doing more of kind of what we traditionally see as the softer skills within
Yeah.
education. But I think probably need to form more of the essential skills, and that's what they're doing really. And they are not for everybody. They're an expensive private school, which means probably the cultural capital that their students are bringing to their studies anyway, is going to be higher than the average school.
Mhm.
Not every child is going to be able to sit in front of a computer for 2 hours and go through and use platforms. So it's I think Mackenzie was really honest with me, and she said, this is not for everyone. Of course it's
Yeah.
not. And they get a lot of students who join them, and then after a few months realize, actually, this is not for us. We need something different. But I kind of applaud them on offering a different way, different
Yeah.
choice. So yeah, it's interesting. And
But I mean, it sounds like, it's not like a warped experience. Like there's a lot of thought that's gone into this, right? They've not just opened up a score and just thrown, some avatars in front of the kids.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think the school was running before kind of the dawn of Gen AI in
Yeah.
2023, or the public dawn of it. So the school's been going for quite a while, was using machine learning platforms beforehand, and now are just updating their platforms with some of the more modern Gen AI platforms. But as Mackenzie said to me on the podcast as well, those headlines have helped the school as well, because they brought a lot of attention.
Yeah.
And publications love a fancy headline, don't they?
Clickbait, right?
Yeah, even if it's not entirely true. And I think the schools benefited from it, because it's brought them to the attention of more uh, parents around the world.
Yeah.
I just think, yeah, I think it's not that weird dystopia where there's a AI chatbot or an AI deep fake figure on the screen that's teaching a child. It's not that. I don't think hopefully we'll not get there. But yeah, I think it's probably a lesson in looking behind the headlines.
Cool. Cheers, Dan. Before we move on to Paddy, I thought there's a couple of questions or things I wanted just to raise. Whether, and I'm going to sort of put this first question from Alini, is around mitigating the effects of AI hallucinations. And I'm going to say, sort of asking it through the lens of, do the developments that we've seen this month, certainly with Gemini, reduce or mitigate the hallucinations that you have been experiencing with, you experimenting with different AIs?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. So I think they're still there. I think a lot of the tools over the past 3 years have gotten better at the hallucinations. I don't think they as hallucinate as blatantly as they used to. It's still there, I think. In fact, some of the more modern models, I find sometimes I come across hallucinations a bit more frequently than I'm used to. I don't know if that's just them ironing out how the model works, but I think when I work with teachers, I always say the best way to use an AI is if you're already proficient in what you're asking it to do.
Yeah, okay.
Because then you can straight away see the errors. You can straight away see what's going to work. And it might, and when we talk about hallucinations, it might not just be a factual error. It might be the fact that, well, actually, this just doesn't fit the audience I'm making this for, or this isn't my authentic style. So I think that kind of picture of it getting things wrong doesn't just come down to factual things. It comes down to a big spectrum of many other things that we just need to look at. And I think, again, going back to non-technology examples, like how many of us teachers are used to getting textbooks or having textbooks in our classroom? We don't just pick it up and think, right, well, this knows everything. We look through it, don't we? We say, is this suitable for the class I've got? A textbook is a very one-size-fits-all thing, and a response from an AI can be. So we need to always use our critical judgment and adapt authentically to what we're using it for. And if we're going to use it to represent our voice as a professional, then we need to adapt it quite a bit, I think.
Yeah, brilliant. Ajay, thanks. There's some great questions in chat, and I mean, this one here is I don't think we'd answer it now, Dan, because it's around addressing academic honesty, and perhaps we could have a session on academic honesty. So I don't think we'd address that, but I just want to thanks that we recognise your questions. We'll have those. That we will address those in future episodes. Dan, I'm going to move on to and bring in Paddy now. Not all of our guests can be live because there are people based around the world. They're in different time zones, and so you spoke with Paddy earlier this week. So I'm going to just bring up the discussion. But could you say a few things around who he is, and obviously you gave the introduction in the very beginning, but a bit more around why you think his voice is important to be heard.
Yeah, I think around the world, Paddy is known as a leading advocate for inclusion, accessibility, universal design for learning (UDL), which I know a lot of teachers will have come across, specialising in SEND and neurodiversity. Like we've said, he's a UK digital leader, 100 award winner. He's based over in Northern Ireland, where the headquarters of Everway are. And he's an honorary fellow of the University of Ulster, and he serves on the British Educational Suppliers Executive Council. So I think he's a great person to chat to on this topic. I don't think there's anyone better, to be honest. So yeah, that's
amazing. Paddy. So everyone enjoy this interview with Paddy.
Patrick McGrath, it's fantastic to have you on. Yeah, always like chatting to you and getting your take on the current scape of edtech and artificial intelligence. As somebody who works in assistive technology and has been working with AI for a long time and helping educators with this technology, what do you think right now leaders need to focus on?
I think, thanks for having me, Dan. I like to think about AI as I used to for edtech in general for the last number of years. It's much like how do you teach writing, right? And how do you teach writing? And you talk about audience and purpose. And I think that's one of the things that we end up missing out on. It is literally this AI piece that I'm considering for my school. Who's it actually for? Who's it there to help? Is it to be embedded in teaching and learning? Is it to help me with workload or assessment? Is it to help me with admin, productivity, effects? What is the actual purpose of this, and who therefore is going to use it? Am I focusing on helping my senior leaders? Am I focusing on helping my students understand and express themselves differently? Am I focused on inclusion? Am I focused on workload wins? Like, where is my focus? And that's always a thing. And I think there are some underlying things there, Dan, that we always need to consider. If we think audience and purpose, right? So why am I doing it and who am I doing it for? what are the things we can't miss that underpin some of those things, like how do we ensure we promote literacy within that, because that's fundamental to use of a lot of AI. How do we underpin and promote inclusion within that? So how do we make sure that actually the audience and the purpose really helps all of my students? It's a learning piece rather than an AI piece or a technology piece. So for me, it's always focus on that. There must be a purpose. It must be purposeful. And it must be initially, when I start to consider it, like, who's this actually for? Who are we trying to help here? And is it actually enhancing the teaching? Is it enhancing learning? Is it enhancing efficiency? What's it there for? I think that's always key to the sort of foundational point of AI.
Yeah, and absolutely. I suppose with anything, isn't it? It's you need to, it has to be done strategically. But I suppose once you're at that point, there's just so, even you'll know this more than anyone, there's so many options out there now. I think over the last 3 years since generative AI has been a big thing, I've never seen an influx of new technology like it and new platforms, because this technology, as well as offering a lot of benefits, also gives the ability for pretty much anyone to create software as well. So we're getting an influx. Where do we start with that as leaders in education? Do we just have a punt on a tool? Do we run experiments and focus groups? Where should we start with that whole picture?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that, and you know this better than probably anybody I know, is that the amount of noise that there is in the space right now, and my fear around that is exactly as you say. There are so many new AI tools. Are they safe? Are they secure? Are they productive? Are they efficient? You know, all of these questions come up, and the danger that we have as leaders is considering these tools and actually making a conscious choice of, there are too many, there is too much noise, therefore I'm going to pull back on this. And at that point, then you miss the huge upsides and advantages that AI and indeed any technology can bring. So I think we have to be careful of the noise. So you're right. How do you navigate through that? Certainly what I've seen in my experience in terms of success has been looking at what I suppose educators and leaders would have considered traditionally fairly safe tools. So what's safe in most educators' minds? Well, I know my Microsoft platform safe. I know by and large my Google platform. Those tools, so things like Copilot and Gemini, and in particular, I've been absolutely taken, as a lot of people have, with NotebookLM on the Google platform, because that starts to enable us to have some very quick wins that we can demonstrate and model out. And I think there's a sense of I suppose, safety and security in theory come with those inbuilt platform tools, because we can go, well, okay, we know how we can stay reasonably compliant. We have fairly transparent guidelines as to where our student data is stored, used, our internal data. And I think those have been quick wins. And the pilots that I've seen have been successful, have seen senior leaders adopt small bite-sized wins for their staff with these tools. So for example, how can I use NotebookLM to repurpose content or engage better with my students? How can I have quick wins of the resources? How can I help my efficiency in terms of document creation? And those, I know, are very typical things that we've all talked about Gen AI about for a long time. But actually, they're, in my mind, they're the get on the bus things. There's an element of safety and security within those tools that are inbuilt. And there's then an element of familiarity. And I think what we risk in the world of AI is a bunch of new tools coming in, and teachers, again, going back to that ed tech world you and I have lived in for a long time, Dan, where they're just overwhelmed with a multitude of different platforms. So I think if we start there and start to then hone in on some core tools that come back to what I open with, which is that audience and purpose thing. Right now, we know generically we feel a little bit safer in the world of AI. We know about the core tools that can help us with X, Y, and Z. How do we actually hone that in? How do we create a better purpose for some of these tools that we're currently using? And then how do we identify and establish, well, what's next on the safety, security, compliance list that can really, really start to drive some really positive outcomes on learning and teaching? I think we have modeling and bite size and familiarity, for me, are things that work before we start to progress into tools, because we've all seen some brilliant tools that do some incredible things. You and I talk about them and demo them all the time, and they are truly fabulous. But there's a risk that we overwhelm teachers and staff on that, never mind our senior leaders. So you have to lead by example, let's face it.
When I work with leaders, there seems to be a bit of a tension between, especially on the strategic piece, do we be one of those schools that really tries to be ambitious, runs ahead, tries to be innovative, tries to lead the way? Or do we just hold back, just give it a couple of years, let some of those other schools maybe make some of the mistakes, we learn from their mistakes, when we're kind of starting to get a picture of how AI is really going to impact society in AI, then we'll make a move. The safe option, I guess. What would you say to a leader who's thinking about those two options?
I think as in all things, Dan, it is about balance. And I think we all know that this particular world of AI is moving so fast, and we have a risk that if we hold back, that we're simply never going to catch up. You know, how do we support our staff? How do we support our students? This is the reality of the world that every single one of us are living in. And I don't think as a leader we can afford to hold back on this. I mean, I think we absolutely have to embrace it. The speed at which we do that, I do think it has to be considered, and it has to have some balance. But I think every one of us, it behoves every one of us, for the good of our children and our children's children, even at this stage, we have to do it now. And the longer we wait, the bigger kind of the inequity, or the equity gap, I suppose is a better way of putting it, that starts to appear. You imagine in a scenario of two schools that are, 15 miles apart, and one of those leaders says, I'm going to hold back, I'm going to wait to look at the mistakes and look at the challenges and look at the kickback from staff and look what the parents say. And the next school embraces it and they have a considered approach. Where's the better outcomes and where's the better life outcomes going to be for those children? Where's the better performance? Where's the better potential sort of health and well-being of staff going to be? Honestly, it's likely to be in that school that has embraced AI sooner. And it sounds like a panacea and a fix-all, and I know it's not, because there are many problems in the system, but these are things that we can address with AI, and the longer we wait, from my mind and for my money, all we're doing is putting off the inevitable. Like this is not going to go away, and the opportunity that this affords to our students and our staff is immense. And I think it's on all of us to embrace this as soon as we can. But again, it's back to the key word. It is about balance, of course it is.
And I know you say that coming from a place of working with Everway, formerly Text Help, and the work that you guys have done to put assistive technology into the hands of students and teachers who really need it, and that helps them with their ADHD, helps them with their dyslexia. And you've worked in that field for years. You've seen the impact, the positive impact technology can have. What would you say then? Because there seems to be a bubbling up, a rising up of opinion at the moment, mainly coming from Jonathan Haidt and his Anxious Generation book, and the kind of following he's got, where there's a real backlash at the minute, I feel, in some quarters of education around actually technology should be removed from the classroom, which is a complete stark contrast to embrace AI in the classroom, isn't it? What would you say to that absolutist argument of, like, just get all technology out of the classroom? Why are we even talking about AI?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of things there. Let me touch just upon one tiny thing you mentioned there, which was, of course, the world I work in is world of inclusion and SEND. And the challenge that there has always been in those circles is that this technology, let's call it specialist technology, and you know me, Dan, I don't like the word assistive and specialist and all of those things, because technology is technology at the end of the day. And if it supports or enhances learning, it's important. But the challenge with that piece and that sector is that people have always said, yes, I have 20 students with dyslexia, I will give it to them and this will help them. And what you do when you do that is you negate all of those other students that potentially could benefit from a little bit of extra help or support or additional mode of learning. And I think back on the AI piece is we have a genuine ability here to have something that is useful for everyone for learning. I think that's important. So just wanted to mention that. But on to your main point there, I think we all go around thinking about what is the true purpose of education. And I would argue that on the purpose of education, everybody has a different view on this, Dan, but we are trying to create all-round individuals that are ready for life and society and work. And learning is, of course, an essential key part of that. Traditional mechanisms are very essential to that. But if we are genuinely looking at how do we produce this generation of children that are in our schools now and how to produce them going forward, we have to have them ready for a society which has the types of technology that we're talking about here at their disposal and at their use. Does it mean they're going to go into a career with this? No. Does it mean it will touch their career? Probably. Does it mean we're giving them an advantage if we support them with technology? Of course it does, because technology provides every single one of us with advantages in everything that we do in our daily lives. And I'm not talking about even our world of work, our daily lives. So if we are indeed pursuing this approach to, we want to provide the best for our children in terms of nourishing them and producing them into models for the future in terms of how they live and how they work and how they learn and how they interact and engage with their family, technology will have a central role in that. Does that mean that we solely and exclusively use technology for learning? Absolutely not, because all of that has to be underpinned by sound teaching and learning principles, by sound pedagogy, by sound approaches. And I think people that are pushing back on technology, I feel, have a fundamental lack of understanding on what technology can deliver in terms of personalization and improved outcomes, in terms of supporting different ways of learning, in terms of inclusion, in terms of actually not just doing what we've always done, which was focusing on a traditional sort of didactic approach to teaching, which is actually relatively non-flexible and hasn't been for so long. This technology, for me, opens up the world of equity, opens up the world of inclusion, opens up all of these things that we've all striven for in education for so long, but now they're there. So why do we negate these things? It's like saying, let's go back to horses. Let's not use the car. There are advantages. Are they smelly? Yes. Were horses more smelly? Yes. We've all been there. We've been through the Bob discussion on the horses versus the TT, but we can't stand in the way of that. We have got to turn it around and use those advances to the advantages for us as educators and for the pupils that ultimately we serve.
Amazing. If people want to know more about the work you do, where should they look?
Yeah, pop along to everway.com, and that's everway.com because Predictive Text decides technology's greatest form calls us everyway.com, so it's everway.com. And of course, you can find me on LinkedIn, Dan, as you know.
Wow. I mean, we haven't got time to go through all the different questions that I have, but that was a great conversation. I've seen the chat there, but lots of people were very intrigued by what Paddy's got to say. And one of the questions I had is that Paddy, he made a strong point around moving away from assistive tech for a few to AI tools that support all learners. What do you think that actually looks like in practice for classroom teachers?
Yeah, well, I think when Paddy talks about this, I think his essential main point is that we talk about assistive technology like it's a niche thing, like it's something for the 2 or 3 students in the classroom who maybe have special educational needs, who need that as their way to help them learn. And I suppose, like what we said earlier on, actually, if we don't treat the inclusion side of things as an afterthought, well, here we've got the lesson. Now let's think about those 3 students, for example. But we actually go, right, well, actually, how can we make this an inclusive learning experience for everybody from the start? And I know Paddy is a big advocate for UDL, Universal Design for Learning, which is kind of the core principle behind UDL, that actually we should be looking how everybody, when we're designing the learning experience, can access it, rather than how can the majority and then the few are an afterthought.
One of the for me, one of the things that hit home was when Paddy was giving the contrast between these 2 schools that are 15 miles apart. One school that's going like full AI, or like not full AI, but integrating AI in a responsible way, where the other school just sitting on the sidelines and going, well, I'm just going to wait and see what happens. And that in itself, building a level of system level inequity is what I think is a term he referenced. Really, I suppose your thoughts on schools that are taking the latter approach, in terms of, do we think that in 2 years' time, it's not that very off, 2 years' time, we're going to see this inequity building between schools who haven't taken the plunge into AI versus those who've sat on the sidelines?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, and this is purely my opinion, I think we're already seeing that to a certain extent. I think when we go back to COVID, I was the first year of COVID, I was looking after the whole digital side of the school, which was pretty much all of the school in that first year. And the inequality we saw between students who only had 4G on their parents' phone in the house, compared to some students who had MacBooks and skills to use it really well, was crazy. The gulf was huge. I think when it comes to artificial intelligence now, being able to use it, like you say, in a safe way, in a responsible way, but in a way that benefits the individual, versus not having those skills and not having that accessibility, is already making that gap become a gulf, and an ever-growing gulf. And I think sometimes even by default, because like we talked about at the start, Gemini comes out with a new model which is capable of more, and therefore the skills you've already got to use a tool like Gemini suddenly give you much more capability. So even by default, that gap is growing. Now, does that mean that both of those schools 15 miles apart should be diving deep into it with their eyes shut? Absolutely not. We have to do this in a safe way. And I think one of the message Paddy was trying to get across was that actually we've got to get on the bus. That's the first point. He used that kind of analogy. And that's not to say we get in a Ferrari and go 150 miles an hour down the road, but we get on the bus and we start to learn from other people on the bus. We start to see what we can do with this. And just to squeeze the analogy to an inch with it in its life, we can get off at any stop as well. We can sorry, that was bad. I gotta stop talking now.
Brilliant. Got you through me there, but it is great. It is a great analogy about it. And I really like, I mean, there are so many points in there with that conversation you had with Paddy. We've not got all the time to explore them, but in the next edition, there will be a box on the sign up page where people can put in additional questions that they may have had around the observations around the chat that we've had today, and also what Paddy brings to. We'll try to prepare for those. So if when you sign up for the next edition, put any questions or observations in, and we could address them at the next edition. I'd like to bring in at this point Julia Piddock. So Julia is one of our senior consultants at Nine, and a core balance, and that's what we said at the very beginning. A core balance is like, all the great things you can be doing with the developments of AI, whilst doing it in a very safe, secure, and compliant way. And Julia, you've been looking at some of the technical developments around Gemini and Nano Banana and a load of other sorts of stuff. And you're about to take us through some of the risks and challenges that we have seen, and also the trends that we see at Nine. Like, our role is to support schools with embedding technology and AI in a safe, secure, and compliant way. And we have a very good knowledge base. Intelligence, I would say, it's human-led intelligence. Whilst we use AI to bring some of those things to the fore, we always have a human in the loop to confirm what we think are the risks. And Julia, you're one of the human in the loops. So over to you. What have we seen in terms of some of the things that Dan's discussed, and where are the core challenges? And we're going to, me and Dan will jump in as we sort of go through.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a really interesting discussion. So thank you both for that. So one of the things that I do at Nine is I lead a team who work on our vendor library. So the vendor library provides our clients and customers with pre-assessed vendor assessments, pre-filled vendor assessments, based on how we know tools are being used in the main. And then, of course, they can be edited by our schools. So we're taking quite a lot of the hard work away. And we're looking at a lot of the documentation, privacy documentation, AI documentation, those kinds of things. So what we're really seeing in this space is, you were talking down there with Paddy about the huge amount of AI and the saturation of the sector. And we are seeing AI coming in all kinds of different ways. So not only dedicated AI platforms, but we're seeing AI come in tools that you're using every day. So as educators, as operational staff, you have a platform that you use for your everyday role, and all of a sudden it's got AI in it. What do we do about that? Can we switch it off? Do we switch it on? What are the safety concerns? What are the privacy concerns? So one of the things that we certainly aim to do when we're looking at vendors from the point of view of a school, and we're making sure that these assessments are carried out and these controls are in place to ensure safeguarding and data protection, is to look at what this AI feature is, where it's coming in, and what the vendor is saying about it. So how are they building safety in? How are they building data protection in? And that's one of the things that we are looking at when it comes to, particularly to AI, when we're considering vendors for schools as well.
And the things that you've looked at this week, and when we talk about Gemini or Nano Banana, is there anything specific that you've seen in terms of the use cases that we've discussed around what are the red flags, or what are the safeguarding risks of harm, what are the privacy considerations of those products?
Absolutely. So we talked quite a lot about NotebookLM today. So I'm going to concentrate quickly on that in terms of the kind of free versus paid model, because we have considered kind of we've looked at as consultants, we've looked at the difference between NotebookLM free and NotebookLM paid. Paid being you're accessing NotebookLM through your school's workspace for education environment. And what happens is this is a really important distinction. I'm just going to bring up our assessments to show you. But this is a really important distinction because quite often the paid version provides you with more privacy and safeguarding measures. The issue is that nothing is ever free, right? So the commercial structure is usually that if it's a free product, they're making money somewhere else, and that's usually on your data and your information and any information and data you put into an AI tool. So this is our vendor library, and you can see quickly here from this particular screen, this is N on in our alphabet. We have lots of different vendor assessments that you can download, that you can grab and put into your own log, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting for you. But what I want to concentrate on is when we look at Google, we've got, I have lost half my screen here. Let me just grab it back. So we've got two different assessments. We've got one for the free tool and we've got one for the tool within Workspace, because this is really important that we distinguish between the two because the risks are different. So when we look at a vendor, whether you are using this tool or anything else, you've got to consider how you're using the tool and what the features are. And the features are different for both versions, but also that the risks are different. So at the end of our assessment, we provide schools with the risks that we've identified and also the guidance around them. And what you'll see here is in the free version of NotebookLM, we've got an additional risk, or additional issue rather, which is that the tool NotebookLM is not acting as a processor. What we term in data protection terminology as a processor on behalf of your school. It's doing its own thing. It's going to process data and do what he wants with that data, which ultimately can mean training the model. And what we see with the workspace version, with enterprise versions of tools, is that you have these data protection addendums and agreements. You can see we've got a lot of documentation here, and the documentation differs between both the products. So the additional documentation that you get within Workspace or within an enterprise or an dedicated education version of a tool, you're going to see that you have extra controls in place, which provide additional safeguards, because of course there are always concerns that you would find that information is being used to train the model, and potentially what information could that be? Could it be information about students? Could it be even, are you considering whether you're entering sensitive information into these tools? And personal information, is it identifiable? Are you adding people's, students' names along with their, for an extreme example, along with their counselling records or their SEN records? I think that's very unlikely. I think our schools are, and all the schools on this call are going to have very good safeguards in place to make sure that wasn't the case. But we do need to consider these situations. So that's. I
think that's really. I'm just conscious of time, but I think there's a really good point here around. First of all, if you want to see more about the vendor products, get in contact with Nine, and you can have the free notebook one that Julia has shown there. You can have that as a trial product for free, so you can get the assessment for free about through the Nine platform. So get in contact with the team. One of the things that we've seen here, Dan, and we are seeing more and more with edtech vendors, at Google, they're being quite responsible, because they are saying, if you pay us, we're going to protect your personal data. We did an assessment of like the top 50 edtech apps. And we managed to do, out of the top 50 edtech apps, 27 of them we did like properly. And I think there's I can't remember the actual statistic, but it's like a third of those, so more than I think it's 11 vendors who use a school are paying for. They're actually also, in their terms and conditions, using all the personal data that you put into that platform to train their model. And I think this is going to be a big concern for schools moving forward.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's the number one takeaway, I think, from this, is that the data you put into these tools, like we said, circling all the way back to the beginning, these tools, if they seem too good to be true, they probably using your contextual data in a way that might not be the safest way to use it, especially as Julia says, if it's a free tool. But I think I'd love to know, because I tend to, when I'm working with schools, I'd say, right, it's start with your ecosystem. So if you're using Microsoft and you pay for the security, start with what's in there. If you're using Google, start with that's in there. And is that a trend that you guys see as well? Is that something you would recommend?
I think so. Like I would say, less is more. Start with a core ecosystem, which is Google or Microsoft, and then you build on that in a more controlled way. We are like, I can forecast, like with my privacy hat on, I can forecast schools in many different territories and jurisdictions, probably outside North America, outside the US even. They're going to be fined around the use of AI within teaching and learning concept because of that issue of what Julie has just highlighted. And I'm sure there are, I know, for example, there are a lot of other issues like that are just going to come out in the woodwork, and Julie's going to come through those, and as we go through each of these editions. But I really encourage you, you watching this, if there's any specific components of compliance that you want us to really focus on, then let us know, because we can touch upon those and draw those out. But also, Julie is going to start providing some more analysis around the trends that we are seeing. So is controllership an issue, or there are more other types of issues? I think it would be really useful. Look, I think we're out of time. Really great conversations. Julia, I know we sort of like managed to squeeze you in. We'll make sure that we sort of give some more time. My bad there. Dan, in the next edition, we have a great guest. And just to wrap up, I'd like to give Julia the floor to you to give us an overview of who we got and what we're talking about next.
So we've got Saba Quidwai, who's going to come on as a guest. Saba is a good friend of mine. She's well known, especially in the United States. Her book Design in Schools is a fantastic read, and she works with school districts and schools around the world, helping them through design thinking to innovate.
Fantastic. So look forward to the invite. Tell your colleagues about the playbook. Sign up to Dan's newsletter. It's brilliant. That is what we're basing our conversations on. And the more of you that can engage in that conversation, the more value that we can bring, and the right people we can bring to have a relevant discussion. So thank you very much, everyone. Cheers, Dan. Thank you, Julia. And everyone have a great, wonderful day. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.